Hey, tonight we're going to journey back to the green woods of medieval England, where outlaw legends were born and forest laws were broken. We'll discover what it was really like to be Robin Hood, far from the Hollywood tales you might know. If you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I'm curious where you're listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Now, find a cozy spot, take a slow, deep breath, and let your body sink into comfort as we journey back in time together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in 12th century England. The year is 1192, and King Richard the Lionheart is away fighting in the Crusades. His brother, Prince John, rules in his absence, and the forests of England are under the strictest laws imaginable. The morning air bites at your skin as you open your eyes. You're lying on a bed of dried leaves and pine needles that poke through your thin woolen tunic. The ground beneath you is hard and uneven, and there's a chill that seems to seep into your bones despite the approaching summer. This is your bed now, the forest floor of Sherwood. You flex your fingers, feeling the rough calluses that have formed over months of living wild. The skin on your palms is cracked from constant exposure to the elements. Good news, they've toughened up nicely. Bad news, they sting when you grip your longbow. And in this life, you need to grip that bow every single day. Nearby, Little John stirs on his own makeshift bed, his massive frame barely covered by the threadbare blanket he bartered from a travelling merchant 3 moons ago. His breath makes small clouds in the morning air. The others are still sleeping, Will Scarlet curled up tight against the cold, Much the miller's son, with his arm thrown over his face to block the emerging dawn light slanting through the ancient oaks. This is your band now, not the merry men of stories, but desperate men with prices on their heads, men who faced a choice between death at the end of a hangman's rope or life as outlaws beyond the protection of the king's law. The smell of damp earth fills your nostrils as you sit up slowly, muscles aching from another night on the ground. Sleeping rough isn't romantic or adventurous. It's painful and exhausting. Your back never quite gets used to it, though it does get better with time. The first weeks were the worst, when every morning brought new pains and stiffness that made you question your choice to flee into the greenwood. You run your fingers through your hair, now long and tangled. There are no baths in the forest, just quick washes in cold streams when you dare to expose yourself to the chill. Your beard has grown thick, good for warmth but itchy and lice-filled if you're not careful to keep it clean. Personal grooming becomes less important when you're focused on simply surviving. Little John groans as he sits up, his joints cracking loudly in the quiet of the dawn. Another day in paradise, he mutters, his voice gravelly from sleep and the constant dampness that seems to cling to everything in the forest. At least we're not hanging from the sheriff's gallows, you reply, the same response you give almost every morning. It's become a ritual between you, his complaint and your reminder that despite everything, you're still alive. Yet, he adds with a wry smile that doesn't reach his eyes, the smell of wood smoke reaches you before the sight of the small, carefully tended fire at the edge of your camp. Much is already awake after all, tending to the morning meal. The fire is small and the smoke minimal, a skill you've all had to master. A large fire would bring the sheriff's men down upon you faster than you could knock an arrow. Even this small one is a risk, but the morning is cold enough to justify it. You stretch, feeling every muscle protest after another night on the hard ground. Your stomach growls loudly, reminding you that dinner last night was meagre, a thin stew of wild onions and the last of a rabbit caught 2 days ago. Food is a constant worry. The forest provides, yes, but not consistently and not abundantly, especially when you're trying to avoid the foresters who patrol the king's woods. The king's woods. That's what got you here in the first place. The forest laws. You never think about how important a deer is until killing one makes you an outlaw, you murmur to yourself. Before you became Robin Hood, you were simply Robert, a yeoman with a small plot of land at the edge of the village. You weren't wealthy, but you weren't destitute either. You worked hard, paid your taxes, and kept your head down. Then came the harsh winter 3 years ago, when the crops failed and your family was starving. The forest, with its deer and boar, seemed like the answer to your prayers. But the forest belonged to the king. Every deer, every boar, every stick of timber was his by law, and the punishment for poaching was severe: blinding, mutilation, or death, depending on the mood of the sheriff and the local lord. You were caught with a freshly killed deer, its blood still warm on your hands. The choice was simple: stay and face the punishment, or run and become an outlaw. Wolf's head, they called it. Caput lupinum, a man who could be hunted like a wolf, killed without consequence. A man with no legal rights, no protection under the law. You chose to run. The weight of your decision still sits heavy in your chest, especially in these quiet morning moments. You left behind a life, meagre though it was. You left behind the safety of known boundaries and laws, but most painfully, you left behind people, a wife whose face grows hazier in your memory with each passing month, a son who might not recognize you now. Will Scarlet stirs, mumbling something unintelligible before sitting up abruptly, his hand automatically reaching for the knife at his belt. Old habits die hard. Will was a soldier before he was an outlaw, and he wakes ready for battle every morning. "Just us, Will," you say softly. "No sheriff's men yet today." Will nods, his shoulders relaxing slightly. The permanent furrow between his brows eases just a fraction. He doesn't speak much in the mornings. None of you do, really. Mornings are for remembering what you've lost and steeling yourself for another day of survival. Much approaches with wooden bowls, crude things you've carved yourselves during the long winter evenings. "Breakfast," he announces without enthusiasm. "Such as it is." The bowl contains a thin gruel made from the few oats you managed to steal from a passing merchant's cart 2 days ago. It's bland and barely warm, but it's something to fill the hollow in your stomach. "We need to hunt today," Little John says between mouthfuls. "Proper hunt, not just setting snares and hoping." You nod in agreement. Hunger has become your constant companion, gnawing at your insides with dull teeth. The forest is bountiful in summer, less so in spring, and winter is a constant battle against starvation. You've learned which roots can be eaten, which berries won't poison you, how to set snares for rabbits and squirrels. But sometimes only a deer will do, for its meat, its hide, its sinew for bowstrings. And every time you take a deer, you're reinforcing your status as an outlaw. It's a bitter irony. The very act that made you criminals is the act you must continue to perform to survive. North Ridge, you suggest. Saw tracks there yesterday. The others nod. There's no need for lengthy discussion. You've been living together in the forest long enough to communicate with minimal words. Survival breeds efficiency. After the meagre breakfast, you prepare for the day. Your longbow, the most precious possession you own, needs checking for any signs of warping from the damp. The string needs to be dry and taut. Your arrows, carefully stored in a leather quiver to protect them from moisture, need to be counted and inspected. This bow is your lifeline. With it, you feed yourself and your men. With it, you defend yourself against those who would capture you. With it, you occasionally rob the rich travellers who pass through the forest roads, though that's a rarer occurrence than the ballads would have you believe. Most travellers are as poor as you once were, with nothing worth taking. The longbow itself is a work of art and craftsmanship. You made it yourself, as all English yeomen learn to do. It's carved from a single piece of yew, the outer sapwood forming the back of the bow, the inner heartwood forming the belly. It stands as tall as you do, and drawing it requires strength built up over a lifetime of practice. Every English boy learns the longbow from the time he can stand. By law, actually, the king wants archers for his wars. The irony isn't lost on you that the very skill the king's law required you to master is now the skill that keeps you alive as you break the king's laws. As you check your bowstring, unwaxed hemp, carefully twisted and maintained, you can't help but remember the archery butts in your village where you practiced every Sunday after church. The camaraderie, the competition, the ale afterward. Another life. Ready? Little John asks, interrupting your memories. He carries a quarterstaff, a solid length of oak nearly 7 feet long. He's deadly with it, able to knock a man unconscious with a single swing. You've seen him do it. You nod, slinging your quiver over your shoulder and gripping your bow. The others are ready too, each with their preferred weapons. Will with his soldier's sword and knife, Much with his sling and pouch of carefully selected stones. Together, you move out from the camp, feet silent on the forest floor, another skill you've mastered by necessity. The damp earth cushions your steps, and you instinctively avoid twigs and dry leaves that might snap or crunch. You communicate with hand signals, pointing out tracks and signs. The forest is waking around you. Birds call from the branches above, squirrels chitter as they race along the limbs, and occasionally you hear the rustle of something larger moving through the underbrush. Every sound makes you tense, ears straining to distinguish between natural forest noises and the approach of danger. The danger is real and constant. The Sheriff of Nottingham, not a fictional villain but a royal official tasked with upholding the king's law, has a standing bounty on your heads. His foresters patrol the woods regularly, and they know the forest almost as well as you do now. Almost, but not quite. Because when your survival depends on knowing every hollow tree that can provide shelter, every stream that offers clean water, every patch of ground that won't turn to mud in the rain, you learn the forest in a way no casual visitor can. You follow deer tracks to a small clearing where the morning sun breaks through the canopy. There, grazing peacefully, is a young buck. Not the largest you've seen, but enough meat to feed you all for several days if properly preserved. Your movements become even more deliberate as you silently nock an arrow. The bow creaks slightly as you draw, a sound that seems thunderous in the quiet clearing, but doesn't alert the deer. Your muscles strain against the pull. A hunting bow requires at least 100 pounds of draw weight, and holding it steady takes considerable strength. You aim for the spot just behind the deer's front leg, where the arrow will pierce the heart for a clean, quick kill. There's no sport in this, only necessity. You respect the animal that will die to feed you, and you want its passing to be swift. The arrow flies with a whisper of displaced air. The deer drops almost instantly, legs buckling as the arrow finds its mark. A clean kill. But there's no time for celebration. The death of the deer makes you criminals all over again. Now comes the dangerous part, butchering and transporting the meat back to camp without being seen by the foresters. You work quickly, all of you knowing your roles without discussion. Will and Much stand guard while you and Little John dress the deer, removing the internal organs first to prevent the meat from spoiling. The metallic smell of blood fills your nostrils, and your hands quickly become slick with it. This is the reality of survival. Blood and dirt and sweat. Not the clean, heroic image from the ballads that will someday be sung about you, but the messy business of staying alive one more day. Riders, Will hisses suddenly from his lookout position. Everyone freezes. The sound reaches you a moment later. Hoofbeats on the forest path not far away. Multiple horses moving at a walking pace, not galloping, which means they haven't spotted you yet, but close enough to be dangerous. Foresters? Little John whispers. You shake your head. too noisy for foresters. That's both good and bad news. Good because foresters move quietly through the woods, knowing their quarry is alert and wary. Bad because whoever these riders are, they're not trying to hide their approach, which suggests numbers or confidence, or both. "Finish up," you murmur to Little John, wiping your bloody hands on the forest floor, mixing the deer's blood with dirt to make it less visible on your skin. "Will, much, scatter. Meet at the hollow oak if we're separated." They nod and move off in different directions, melting into the forest with practiced ease. Little John works swiftly, cutting the last tendons to free the deer's hide. You'll use every part of the animal: the meat for food, the hide for clothing or trade, the sinew for bowstrings, the antlers for tools. The hoofbeats grow louder. Too close now. You won't have time to move the deer. "Leave it," you decide reluctantly. Abandoning the kill means wasted meat and wasted risk, but being caught with it means certain death. Little John hesitates only a moment before nodding. Together you retreat from the clearing, moving from tree to tree, using the underbrush as cover. The heavy morning dew soaks through your leather boots as you crouch in a thicket of brambles, thorns catching on your clothes. The riders enter the clearing, 5 mounted men in the livery of the Sheriff of Nottingham, led by a figure you recognise with a jolt of hatred. Guy of Gisborne, the Sheriff's master-at-arms, a cruel man who enjoys the hunt for outlaws a little too much. They spot the deer immediately, impossible to miss with the ground disturbed and blood pooling beneath the carcass. "Fresh kill," Gisborne announces, dismounting to examine it. The blood's still warm. "Hood?" one of the men-at-arms asks. "Who else would dare?" Gisborne replies, looking around the clearing with narrowed eyes. "They can't be far. Spread out and search." Your heart pounds in your chest as the men dismount and begin to move into the forest. One is heading directly toward your hiding place. Your hand tightens on your bow, but you know that shooting now would bring all of them down on you. The man-at-arms moves closer, his eyes scanning the underbrush. He's less than 10 feet away now, close enough that you can see the dirt under his fingernails and the small scar that runs along his jaw. His hand rests on the hilt of his sword. He stops, looking directly at your hiding place. For a heart-stopping moment, you think he's seen you, your muscles tense, ready to spring if he raises the alarm. Then a call from Gisborne pulls his attention away. "Nothing here, sir," he shouts back, giving your thicket one last glance before returning to the clearing. You release the breath you didn't realize you were holding. Beside you, Little John does the same, the air escaping his lungs in a silent stream. The men confer briefly before mounting their horses again. To your surprise and relief, they don't take the deer, perhaps fearing it's been deliberately left as bait for a trap. As their hoofbeats fade into the distance, you remain motionless, counting slowly to 100 before daring to move. "That was too close," Little John mutters as you finally emerge from hiding. "Too close," you agree, returning to the deer. "But we still have our dinner." This time you work even more quickly, quartering the deer and wrapping the portions in the hide for transport. The weight is substantial. A good-sized deer can provide 50 pounds of meat or more, but divided between you, it's manageable. With your precious cargo, you take a circuitous route back to camp, doubling back several times to ensure you're not being followed. The extra weight makes the journey harder, sweat soaking through your tunic despite the cool morning air. By the time you reach camp, the sun is high in the sky. Will and Much are already there, having made it back safely. The relief on their faces when they see you return with the meat is palpable. "Started to think Gisborne had you," Will admits, helping to unload the deer portions. "Nearly," you reply. "But not today." Not today. It's another phrase that's become ritual among your band. Not today will we be caught. Not today will we hang. Not today will we die. One day at a time is how you survive as outlaws. The rest of the day is spent preserving the meat, some cut into strips to be smoked over a small, nearly smokeless fire of green wood, some rubbed with the precious little salt you have, some to be eaten fresh tonight. Nothing is wasted. You can't afford waste. As evening falls, and you sit around the small fire, bellies full for the first time in days, there's a rare moment of contentment. Will brings out a small wooden flute and plays a soft, melancholy tune, one of the few luxuries you allow yourselves. Music carries in the forest, but tonight you deem it worth the small risk. The flickering firelight catches on tired faces that, for once, aren't pinched with hunger. These men are your family now, bound not by blood but by circumstance and survival. They would die for you, as you would for them. It's a bond forged in constant danger and mutual dependence. "Tell us about life before," Much asks suddenly. He's the youngest of your band, barely 20 summers old. "Before the forest." You hesitate. Memories of your former life are both precious and painful. But tonight, with full bellies and the relative safety of your well-hidden camp, seems as good a time as any for stories. Before you begin, your voice low. "I had a cottage at the edge of Loxley village. Nothing grand. 2 rooms with a thatched roof that leaked when the rain came from the west. But it was mine. Or at least, I thought it was mine." The others listen silently. They've heard parts of your story before, but never all at once. Each of them has their own tale of how they came to be outlaws, each with its own injustices and sorrows. "I had a wife, Marion," the name still catches in your throat. "She wove cloth finer than any in the village, and a son, barely walking when I had to flee." The fire crackles in the silence that follows. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, 3 haunting notes that echo through the darkening forest. "Do you think you'll ever see them again?" Much asks, his young face earnest in the firelight. You stare into the flames, watching them dance and flicker. "I don't know," you answer honestly. "Sometimes I send messages through the friars who pass through the forest. Sometimes I hear rumours from travellers. Marion still lives in Loxley, they say. My son grows strong. What you don't say is that your son likely doesn't remember you, that Marion may have given up hope of your return, that the life you once had slips further away with each passing day in the greenwood." "One day," Little John says firmly, "when King Richard returns from the Crusades, they say he's a just king. He'll set things right." You nod, though you're not as confident as Little John pretends to be. Kings come and go, but the forest laws remain. Still, hope is as necessary for survival as food and shelter, so you let him have this one. "One day," you agree, watching the sparks from the fire rise into the darkening sky, disappearing among the emerging stars. "But for now, we have this night, this meal, this company." And as your eyelids grow heavy with the satisfaction of a full stomach and the warmth of the fire, you think that perhaps, just perhaps, it's enough for now. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. More hunting, more hiding, more fighting to survive. But that's tomorrow. Tonight, in this small clearing in Sherwood Forest, surrounded by men who have become brothers, you allow yourself the luxury of rest. Your muscles gradually relax as you lie back on your bed of leaves, the aches of the day easing slightly. The last thing you see before sleep claims you is the canopy of ancient oaks above, their branches spread wide like protective arms, sheltering you from the world that has cast you out. In the forest that has become both your prison and your sanctuary, you find a moment's peace. Not the peace of safety or certainty, but the fragile peace of having survived another day. Not today, you think as consciousness fades. Not today. The village of Loxley appears through the morning mist, smoke rising from cook fires in thin grey tendrils. You crouch at the forest's edge, watching. It's been 3 months since you've dared come this close to your former home. The risk is enormous. Every person in the village would recognise your face, but necessity drives you. Winter is coming, and your band needs supplies you can't find or make in the forest. Are you certain about this? Little John whispers beside you, his massive frame somehow managing to stay hidden behind a gnarled oak that seems too small to conceal him. You nod, though certainty is a luxury you haven't felt since becoming an outlaw. We need salt for the meat and cloth for the winter. We can't survive another year without proper supplies. What you don't say aloud is that you also need to know if Marion and your son still live here, if they're well, if they remember you. The morning air is sharp with the first real bite of autumn. Your breath forms small clouds that dissipate quickly in the cool breeze. The trees around you have begun their transformation, green giving way to gold and crimson. Beautiful, yes, but also a warning. Winter in Sherwood Forest is merciless to the unprepared. Market day, Will Scarlet murmurs from your other side, nodding toward the small collection of stalls being set up in the village centre. Good for us. More people, more confusion. Bad for us, you counter. The sheriff's men always patrol on market day. As if summoned by your words, 2 mounted men-at-arms in the sheriff's livery appear at the far end of the village, the rising sun glinting off their mail coifs. They ride slowly through the gathering crowd, eyes scanning faces, hands resting on sword hilts. Perfect, Will grins, his scar twisting his smile into something feral. Now we know where they are. You shake your head at his eagerness. Will has never lost his soldier's desire for confrontation, even when avoidance is the wiser path. We're not here to fight. We get what we need and leave without being seen. Your plan is simple enough. Much, being the least recognisable of your band, will enter the village openly to trade the small trinkets you've carved over the long summer evenings, wooden combs, spoons, bowls, for the supplies you need. The rest of you will wait at the forest's edge, ready to provide support if trouble arises. Much adjusts the rough sack containing your trade goods, his young face solemn with responsibility. What if someone recognises me? Keep your hood up and your head down, you tell him. Speak as little as possible. Remember, you're a traveller passing through, not a local. He nods, straightening his shoulders. And if I see Marion, the question catches you off guard, though it shouldn't. Much knows what this village means to you. Don't approach her, you say after a moment's hesitation. Don't risk drawing attention to her. Just tell me if she's well. Much nods again and steps out from the cover of the trees, transforming his posture into the slight stoop of an older man. Even from a distance you can see how he subtly changes his gait, hiding his youth and strength behind a facade of weariness. He's learned well in his time with you. You watch with held breath as he mingles with the arriving villagers, just another traveller come to trade on market day. The morning sun strengthens, burning away the mist and illuminating the scene more clearly. The village looks smaller than you remember, the cottages more weathered, the people thinner. 3 years of heavy taxation under Prince John's regency have taken their toll. Your gaze is drawn to your old cottage at the edge of the village. The thatch has been repaired since you last saw it, and smoke rises steadily from the chimney. Someone still lives there at least. Your heart pounds faster at the thought that Marion might step through that door at any moment. Movement, Little John whispers, pulling your attention back to the market. Sheriff's men. The two mounted guards have noticed much and are watching him with the bored interest of men who suspect nothing but are paid to be suspicious anyway. Much keeps his head down, haggling with a woman selling salt and dried herbs. His performance is convincing enough that the guards soon lose interest and continue their patrol. You release a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Each moment much remains in the village is dangerous, but you force yourself to be patient. Rushing would only draw attention. The minutes crawl by as Much moves from stall to stall, his sack gradually emptying of wooden crafts and filling with more valuable supplies. He's nearly finished when a commotion erupts at the far end of the market. A thin man in ragged clothing, a peasant by his dress, is being dragged toward the village centre by one of the sheriff's men. The other guard follows, leading a skinny cow on a rope. "Thief!" the guard shouts, throwing the peasant to the ground in front of the gathered villagers. "This man failed to pay his taxes and tried to hide his livestock from the sheriff's collectors." The peasant struggles to his knees, blood streaming from his nose where he struck the ground. "Please," he begs, voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence of the market. "It's my only cow. My children will starve without her milk." The mounted guard dismounts, drawing his sword with deliberate slowness. "The penalty for tax evasion is the loss of the property in question and 10 lashes, he announces, looking around the gathered crowd with cold eyes. "Let this serve as a reminder of what happens to those who defy the sheriff's authority." Your hand tightens on your bow, an arrow already half drawn from your quiver before you realise what you're doing. Little John's hand closes around your wrist, stopping you. "Don't," he whispers urgently. "You can't save him without exposing yourself, without risking all of us. You know he's right." But the knowledge burns like acid in your gut. This is why you became an outlaw, because the law itself had become a tool of oppression rather than justice, because men like the sheriff use their authority to crush rather than protect. The guard hands his sword to his companion and uncoils a whip from his saddle. The peasant is forced to his knees, his shirt torn away to expose his back. The crowd watches in silent horror, no one daring to intervene. And then, through the crowd, you see her, Marion. Your breath catches in your throat. She stands taller than most of the village women, her dark hair bound under a simple linen head covering. Her face is thinner than you remember, the girlish softness replaced by the sharper angles of a woman who has endured hardship. But her eyes, those haven't changed. They burn with the same quiet defiance you remember, the same refusal to accept injustice as inevitable. Beside her stands a boy of perhaps 5 summers, his hand clutched in hers. Your son. He has your colouring, but Marion's eyes, wide now with fear, as he watches the scene unfolding before him. The guard raises his whip and something in you breaks. You can't stand by and watch this happen. Not in front of your son, not when you have the power to stop it. Before little John can stop you again, you knock an arrow, draw, and release in one fluid motion. The arrow whistles through the air and strikes with perfect precision, pinning the guard's whip to the wooden post of a market stall. For a moment, everything freezes. The guard stares at his empty hand, then at the whip pinned a dozen yards away. The crowd gasps collectively, heads turning to find the source of the arrow. "Run," you command little John and Will, already moving deeper into the forest. Get Much and meet at the hollow oak. They hesitate only a moment before obeying, splitting off in different directions to create confusion for any pursuers. You circle around through the trees, using your intimate knowledge of the forest to move quickly while leaving minimal signs of your passage. The sounds of shouting fade behind you as you run, your feet finding purchase on the uneven forest floor without conscious thought. Your breath comes hard and fast, blood pounding in your ears. Not from the exertion, you've grown accustomed to moving swiftly through the greenwood, but from what you've just done. You've revealed yourself. After months of careful hiding, of ghosting through the forest unseen, you've announced your presence with an arrow that could only have come from Robin Hood. The sheriff will double his patrols now. The price on your head will likely increase. And yet, as you slow your pace to a steady jog, you can't bring yourself to regret it. The image of your son watching a man being whipped for trying to feed his family, that would have haunted you far longer than any increased danger. It takes nearly an hour of careful travel to reach the hollow oak, an ancient giant with a trunk wide enough to conceal 2 men inside its weathered cavity. Much is already there, his face pale with fear, but his sack bulging with supplies. I got everything, he says, immediately. Salt, needles, flint, even some wool cloth. Then I heard the commotion. The sheriff's men, you ask, scanning the forest behind him for signs of pursuit. Much shakes his head. No sign of them following me. I think they're more interested in finding the archer. He gives you a pointed look. That was you, wasn't it? You nod, not bothering to deny it. Couldn't help myself. You never can, comes Will's voice as he materializes from the underbrush, moving as silently as a forest spirit. Little John follows a moment later, his size making stealth more difficult but still managing to approach unheard until he chooses to speak. We'll need to move camp, he says, without preamble. They'll be combing the forest by nightfall. Agreed, you say. The caves near the North Stream. Harder to find. Good escape routes. The decision made, you set off immediately, taking a circuitous route to avoid leaving an obvious trail. The day warms as the sun climbs higher, but the forest remains cool beneath the canopy of ancient oaks and beeches. Your feet move automatically, finding the quietest path through the underbrush, while your mind turns over the morning's events. You saw Marion, you saw your son. The knowledge sits like a stone in your chest, both precious and painful. They're alive. They appear healthy, if leaner than you'd like, but they're strangers to you now, living a life separate from yours. Your son is growing up without knowing his father, perhaps even believing you dead, or worse, having forgotten you entirely. She was there, wasn't she? Much asks quietly as you walk side by side. I saw her just before everything happened. She looked well. She did, you agree, grateful for his understanding. And my boy, he's grown so much. Much nods, but says nothing more, giving you the space to process your thoughts. That's one of the things you've come to value about your band. They know when to speak and when silence is a greater kindness. By midday, you've reached the small stream that will lead you to the caves. The water runs clear and cold over smooth stones, the gentle gurgling masking the sound of your passage. You follow it upstream, occasionally wading in the shallows to hide your tracks. The caves appear as dark openings in a limestone bluff, partially hidden by a tangle of ivy and brambles. They're damp and uncomfortable compared to your forest camp, but they offer better protection from both the elements and searching eyes. You've used them before during particularly intense manhunts. Home, sweet home, Will mutters as you duck through the low entrance of the largest cave. The temperature drops immediately, the cool dampness seeping through your clothing. Your breath doesn't steam here as it did in the morning air, but the chill is more penetrating. Just for a few days, you remind him, until the search dies down. The cave extends about 20 feet into the hillside before narrowing into passages too small for a man to navigate comfortably. The floor is relatively flat, covered with small stones and sand deposited by ancient flooding. It's not comfortable, but it's defensible and hidden. You set about making the space habitable, while Little John and Will return to your abandoned camp to retrieve what supplies they can before the sheriff's men discover it. Much unpacks his trading sack, displaying his acquisitions with justifiable pride. The salt cost the most, he explains, showing you a small leather pouch of the precious preservative. But I got a fair amount, enough to cure what meat we have stored. You examine the other items. 2 flint stones for starting fires, a bundle of hand-forged iron needles for mending clothes, a length of rough-spun wool cloth in a dull brown colour, and most surprising, a small pottery jar sealed with wax. "What's this?" you ask, hefting the jar. Much's eyes light up. "Honey, traded my best carved bowl for it. Thought it might help if any of us fall ill this winter." You nod approvingly. Honey is indeed valuable medicine, useful for treating wounds and soothing coughs. It's also a rare sweetness in your otherwise bland diet. Much has chosen well. As you organise the supplies, you recount what happened in the village after Much left, explaining your impulsive decision to fire the arrow. You couldn't have done otherwise, Much says with the absolute certainty of youth, not with your boy watching. "Maybe," you acknowledge, "but it means we'll have a harder time moving freely for a while." The afternoon passes slowly in the confines of the cave. You occupy yourself by checking and rechecking your bow and arrows, making sure the damp air won't affect the seasoned yew or cause the bowstring to stretch. Your fingers move automatically through the familiar motions, checking for cracks in the wood, testing the tautness of the string, examining each arrow for straightness. By the time Little John and Will return, shadows are lengthening outside the cave. They've managed to salvage most of your essential gear: bedrolls, cooking pot, the precious store of dried meat and foraged nuts that will help you through the winter. The relief you feel is palpable. Starting over with nothing as winter approaches would have been devastating. "Any sign of pursuit?" you ask as they unload their burdens. Will shakes his head. "Nothing close to our camp yet, but there are definitely more men in the forest. Heard them crashing about near the East Ridge." "Amateurs," Little John snorts, making enough noise to warn every outlaw within a mile. Despite his dismissive tone, you know better than to underestimate the sheriff's forces. What they lack in woodcraft, they make up for in numbers and determination. And Guy of Gisborne, the sheriff's master-at-arms, is neither noisy nor incompetent. If he's leading the search, you'll need to be especially cautious. As night falls, you build a small fire near the cave entrance where the smoke can escape without betraying your location. The flames cast dancing shadows on the limestone walls, creating an almost otherworldly atmosphere. You keep the fire small, just enough to take the edge off the cave's dampness, and cook a simple meal. Dinner is a stew of dried venison reconstituted in water with wild onions and the last of the summer's herbs. It's not particularly flavourful, but it's hot and filling. You eat in relative silence, each man lost in his own thoughts as the day's events settle in your minds. After the meal, as you sit watching the fire burn down to embers, Little John breaks the silence. "What was it like?" he asks. Seeing them again, you poke at the fire with a stick, buying time to organise your thoughts. The others watch you patiently, understanding the weight of the question. "Strange," you finally answer, "like looking at a life that belongs to someone else now. They've changed. I've changed." "Do you think she saw you?" Will asks. You shake your head. "I don't think so, but she'll know it was me. The arrow. Only a few men can make that shot." Will you try to see her again? Much's question is tentative, almost apologetic for asking. You stare into the dying fire, watching the embers pulse with inner light. I don't know, you admit. It would put her in danger. The sheriff already watches her, suspecting she might have contact with me. What you don't say is that you're afraid she might reject you, afraid she might have built a new life that has no place for an outlaw husband, afraid your son might look at you with the fear or confusion reserved for strangers. The conversation drifts to more practical matters after that. How long you should stay in the caves, where to hunt once you return to the forest proper, how to prepare for the coming winter. The normalcy of the discussion is comforting after the emotional turmoil of the day. As the fire dies completely and darkness enfolds the cave, you arrange your bedroll on the least uncomfortable patch of ground you can find. The stone beneath you radiates cold despite the layer of pine boughs you've placed underneath for insulation. Your muscles ache from the day's exertions and tensions, and sleep seems far away despite your physical exhaustion. In the darkness, you find your thoughts returning to the village, to Marion, to your son. You wonder what stories she tells him about his father. Does she speak of you as a hero, a villain, or simply a man who had to leave? Does she hold out hope for your return, or has she accepted your absence as permanent? These thoughts chase each other through your mind until they're interrupted by a sound at the cave entrance, a soft scuffing that could be the wind moving branches or could be something more concerning. You sit up silently, hand already reaching for your bow. The others are awake too, you can tell by the change in their breathing, by the subtle shift of weight as they reach for their weapons. Months in the forest have attuned you all to the slightest disturbances. A figure appears in the cave entrance, silhouetted against the marginally lighter darkness of the night outside. Your arrow is nocked and halfway drawn before a familiar voice stops you. "It's me," comes the whispered call of Alan Adale, the latest addition to your band. A wandering minstrel by trade, he occasionally serves as your eyes and ears in places where the rest of you dare not go. "I bring news." You lower your bow as Alan enters the cave, his lute slung across his back, as always. He moves to the remnants of the fire, kneeling to warm his hands over the fading heat. "The sheriff has doubled the bounty on your head," he announces without preamble. 500 gold pieces now for Robin Hood, 200 each for his known companions. A low whistle escapes Will's lips. "We've become expensive." "There's more," Alan continues. "The incident at the market today has the sheriff in a rage. He's ordered the peasant who couldn't pay his taxes to be publicly hanged tomorrow as an example. Your stomach twists with guilt. Your intervention, meant to prevent a whipping, has instead condemned a man to death. The weight of responsibility settles heavily on your shoulders." "Where?" you ask, already knowing you can't allow this to happen. "Nottingham. The main square. At noon." Nottingham, the sheriff's stronghold, heavily guarded and supremely dangerous for you to approach. Yet the alternative, letting an innocent man die because of your actions, is unthinkable. "We can't just ride into Nottingham," Little John says, voicing the concern foremost in all your minds. "It would be suicide." "We don't need to ride in," you reply, an idea already forming. "We just need to prevent the hanging." "How?" Will demands. "There will be guards everywhere." You lean forward, lowering your voice even though there's no one to overhear. "The north road to Nottingham passes through Sherwood. They'll have to bring the prisoner that way." Understanding dawns on the faces around you. An ambush on the forest road would be dangerous, but far less so than attempting to rescue the prisoner in Nottingham itself. "How many guards do you think?" Little John asks Alan. The minstrel shrugs. "For a common peasant, no more than 4 or 5. They won't expect trouble on the road." They should, Will grins, his scar gleaming faintly in the dim light, especially in Sherwood. The plan comes together quickly. You know the perfect spot, a narrow section of the road where the forest crowds close on both sides, providing cover for an ambush. The timing will be crucial. Too early, and the guards might have time to send for reinforcements. Too late, and the prisoner will reach Nottingham, where rescue becomes nearly impossible. As the details are settled, a strange feeling spreads through your chest. For the first time since becoming an outlaw, you're not simply reacting to events, not just struggling to survive. You're choosing to act, to intervene, to right a wrong, even at great personal risk. This, you realise, is the moment something changes. The moment Robin the outlaw begins to become Robin Hood of legend. Get some rest, you tell the others as the plan is finalised. Tomorrow will test us all. As you lie back on your bedroll, sleep still eludes you, but for a different reason now. Your mind races with preparations, contingencies, imagined scenarios. The risks are enormous, but so too is the necessity. A man's life hangs in the balance because of your actions. You cannot, will not, abandon him to his fate. In the darkness of the cave, with the soft breathing of your companions surrounding you, you make a silent vow. If you survive tomorrow's rescue, you'll do more than simply exist in the forest, hiding from the sheriff's men and taking only what you need to survive. You'll become a true thorn in the sheriff's side. You'll use your skills, your knowledge of the forest, and the loyalty of your band to actively oppose the injustice that drives men to desperation. You'll become the outlaw that ordinary people can turn to when the law itself becomes their oppressor. With that resolution warming you more effectively than any fire, you finally drift into an uneasy sleep, your dreams filled with arrows flying true to their marks and the faces of those you left behind in Loxley village. Outside the cave, an owl calls into the night, 3 haunting notes that echo through the forest like a promise, or perhaps a warning. The ancient trees of Sherwood stand silent, witness to the birth of a legend they will shelter for years to come. Dawn breaks with reluctant fingers of pale light barely penetrating the forest canopy. You've been awake for hours, positioned high in an ancient oak that overlooks the North Road to Nottingham. The rough bark presses into your back as you balance on a thick branch. Bow at the ready. Your muscles ache from holding still for so long, but you dare not shift position. The slightest movement might catch the eye of the approaching guards. Below and around you, hidden in the undergrowth and behind massive tree trunks, your men wait. Little John with his quarterstaff, Will Scarlet with his soldier's sword, Much with his sling, and Alan with a bow nearly as fine as your own. Not a large force to oppose the sheriff's men, but what you lack in numbers, you make up for in determination and the advantage of surprise. The morning air is heavy with mist that clings to the forest floor, swirling around tree trunks like ghostly fingers. The moisture seeps into your clothes, making them feel clammy against your skin. Your breath forms small clouds that dissipate quickly in the cool air. Autumn is deepening its hold on Sherwood, the leaves now more gold and crimson than green, the forest floor carpeted with those that have already fallen. A jay calls sharply from a nearby tree, startling you despite your tense vigilance. Birds make poor sentinels. They alarm at any disturbance, from a prowling fox to a gentle breeze. Still, you find yourself counting the seconds after its cry, wondering if it signalled the approach of men. And then you hear it. The distant clop of hooves on the packed earth of the road, the jingle of bridles, the creak of leather. Your fingers tighten imperceptibly on your bow, testing the smooth yew one last time. They appear through the mist like apparitions, 4 mounted guards in the sheriff's livery, and between them a single figure on foot. The prisoner is bound with his hands before him, connected by a rope to the saddle of the lead guard. Even from your perch, you can see he stumbles with exhaustion, struggling to keep pace with the horses. The guards look bored rather than alert, confident in their authority and the unlikelihood of trouble on the King's Road. They talk among themselves, voices carrying clearly in the still morning air. "Waste of a day escorting this wretch to Nottingham," complains one, a burly man with a patchy beard. "He's just a peasant who couldn't pay his taxes." "Sheriff's orders," replies another with a shrug. "Make an example of him," he says. "Still, hanging seems excessive for hiding a cow," says a third, younger than the others, his face smooth beneath his helmet. The burly guard snorts. "Getting soft, Thomas? It's not about the cow. It's about defying the sheriff. Can't have the peasants thinking they can hide their livestock when the tax collectors come." Your jaw tightens at the casual cruelty of their conversation. This is what the law has become. Not protection for the people, but a weapon to keep them compliant, to squeeze from them what little they have. The party approaches the narrowest point of the road, where the ancient oaks press closest to the path, their massive roots occasionally breaking through the surface of the packed earth. This is where you've chosen to strike. The spot offers the most cover for your men and the least room for the guards to maneuver their horses. You wait until the lead rider passes directly beneath your position. Then, with a deep breath to steady your aim, you loose your first arrow. It flies true, striking the ground directly in front of the lead horse. The animal rears in fright, nearly unseating its rider. Before the guards can recover from the surprise, you stand on your branch, fully visible now. "Hold!" you call out, voice ringing with authority that you've cultivated over months of leading your small band. "Release your prisoner, and you may continue unharmed." The guards reach for their swords, eyes scanning the trees. The burly one, clearly the leader, spots you and points. "Archer in the tree, get him!" Before he can finish the command, your men emerge from their hiding places, surrounding the small party. Little John steps onto the road, his quarterstaff held ready, blocking the path ahead. Will and Much appear on the opposite side, weapons drawn. Alan remains hidden, his bow trained on the guards from cover. "You're outnumbered," you inform them, knocking another arrow, "and outmatched. I won't ask again. Release the prisoner." The lead guard assesses the situation, eyes narrowing as he counts your visible men. His hand remains on his sword hilt, but he doesn't draw. "You're the one they call Hood," he says, more statement than question. "I am," you confirm, allowing a slight edge to enter your voice. "And I don't take kindly to men being hanged for trying to feed their families." The younger guard, Thomas, looks nervous now, his eyes darting between you and his companions. The prisoner stands frozen, hope and fear warring on his exhausted face. The lead guard spits on the ground. 4 outlaws against 4 of the sheriff's men. I like those odds. He begins to draw his sword. Your second arrow strikes before the blade clears its scabbard, pinning the guard's sleeve to his saddle. He yells in surprise and rage, trying to free himself as his horse dances nervously beneath him. "Would you like to reconsider?" you ask calmly, a third arrow already nocked and ready. What happens next unfolds in heartbeats. The remaining guards draw their swords, spurring their horses toward your men on the ground. Little John meets the charge with his quarterstaff, knocking one guard clean off his mount with a mighty swing. Will engages another, his soldier's training evident in the precision of his movements. Much uses his sling to send a stone whizzing past the third guard's ear, causing him to duck and lose control of his horse momentarily. You fire again, this time aiming for the rope binding the prisoner to the lead guard's saddle. The arrow severs it cleanly, freeing the peasant, who stumbles back in confusion. "Run to me," you shout to him, gesturing toward your tree. The man hesitates only a moment before dashing toward you, ducking beneath the flailing hooves of the guard's horses. The lead guard, having finally freed his sleeve from your arrow, makes a grab for him but misses. The skirmish is brief but fierce. Your men, though outnumbered, have the advantage of surprise and righteous anger. Within minutes, all 4 guards are disarmed, though not seriously injured. This is a deliberate choice. Killing the sheriff's men would only escalate the manhunt against you. You descend from your perch with practiced ease, bow slung across your back. The prisoner stares at you with wide eyes, hardly believing his sudden reversal of fortune. "Thank you," he breathes, his voice rough with emotion. "They were going to hang me for a cow." "No man should die for trying to feed his family," you reply, using your knife to cut his bonds. "What's your name?" "Edward," he answers, rubbing his chafed wrists. "Edward of Wickham Village." You nod, then turn your attention to the disarmed guards. The leader glares at you with undisguised hatred, while young Thomas looks more awed than angry. The other 2 simply appear resigned to their defeat. "You've made a grave mistake, Hood," the lead guard spits. "The sheriff will hunt you to the ends of the earth for this." "He was already doing that," you reply with a slight smile. "Now, we need to discuss terms." "We don't negotiate with outlaws," the guard sneers. "Then consider it instructions," you counter, gesturing for Little John to bring the horses. "You 4 will continue to Nottingham, but without your prisoner. You'll tell the sheriff that Robin Hood sends his regards and suggests he focus on catching real criminals rather than starving peasants." The guard laughs harshly. "And why would we deliver this message instead of simply reporting that you ambushed us?" "Because," you say, your voice hardening, "I'm allowing you to keep your lives and dignity." You return to Nottingham on foot without weapons, and the story spreads that Robin Hood bested the sheriff's men. You deliver my message, and at least you returned with your honour as soldiers intact. The threat is clear, though unspoken. Fail to deliver the message, and next time you might not be so merciful. Something in your expression must convince him, for the guard's face pales slightly. "You'll regret this, Hood. The sheriff has ways of dealing with outlaws." "I'm counting on him to try," you reply, signalling to your men to take the guards' weapons and gather the horses. Within minutes you've relieved the guards of anything useful. Swords, daggers, a small pouch of coins that was likely meant for their expenses in Nottingham, and of course, their mounts. The guards are left standing in the road, dishevelled but unharmed, as you lead your small party into the depths of Sherwood. You travel swiftly, taking a circuitous route back toward your cave hideout, frequently doubling back or splitting up temporarily to confuse any potential pursuit. The forest enfolds you in its protective embrace, the dense undergrowth and towering trees creating a natural labyrinth that only those intimately familiar with its secrets can navigate confidently. Edward, the rescued peasant, rides behind Little John on one of the confiscated horses, his face still showing disbelief at his sudden change in circumstances. The poor man is exhausted, his feet bloodied from the forced march to Nottingham, his body thin from months of insufficient food. By midday, you're certain you've evaded any immediate pursuit and make camp in a small clearing near a brook. The horses are watered and tethered where they can graze, while Much starts a small, nearly smokeless fire to prepare a meal. You sit beside Edward, offering him a water skin and watching as he drinks gratefully. "What will you do now?" you ask when he's finished. "You can't return to Wickham. The sheriff's men will be looking for you." Edward stares at his hands, the reality of his situation settling over him like a physical weight. "I don't know," he admits. "My wife, my children, they're still in the village. The pain in his voice is familiar, the same ache you feel when you think of Marion and your son in Locksley. The separation from those you love is perhaps the cruelest aspect of outlawry. We can get a message to them, you offer, perhaps arrange for them to join you somewhere safe. Where? Edward asks bitterly. Where is safe from the sheriff? From the king's law? It's a question without an easy answer. The forest has become your sanctuary, but it's a hard life, especially for women and children. The constant moving, the exposure to the elements, the uncertainty of food, these are heavy burdens even for strong men. For now, you're welcome among us, you tell him, making a decision you've made before and will make again many times in the years to come. We can use another pair of hands and you'll be safe in Sherwood. Edward looks around at your small band, now setting up the camp with practiced efficiency. You'd taken a stranger, just like that? We were all strangers once, you reply. Every man here has a story not so different from yours. The law failed them, so they chose to live beyond it. As if to emphasize your point, Will approaches, offering Edward a bowl of stew, the same rabbit and wild onion mixture you've been living on for days. Eat, he encourages. You'll need your strength. Edward accepts the bowl with murmured thanks, and the smell of the simple food seems to awaken his hunger fully. He eats ravenously, like a man who hasn't seen a proper meal in weeks. Perhaps he hasn't. While Edward eats, you convene a small council with your original band, moving just far enough away to speak privately. We can't keep taking in every man the sheriff condemns, Little John points out, though his expression shows he takes no pleasure in saying it. Our resources are stretched thin as it is, with winter coming. What would you have me do, you ask, genuinely seeking his counsel rather than challenging him. Leave him to hang, Little John sighs, running a hand through his beard. Of course not, but we need a better solution than adding another mouth to feed. We could use the horses, Will suggests. They're valuable. We could trade them in one of the northern villages for supplies. And risk being recognized, Alan counters. The sheriff's men will be watching for those horses. We need a more sustainable approach, you say, thoughts coalescing into something resembling a plan. Today we took from the sheriff's men to help one peasant, but there are others suffering under these unjust laws. What are you suggesting? Much asks, his young face eager. The sheriff grows wealthy on taxes taken from people who can barely feed themselves, you explain. His coffers fill while villagers starve. Perhaps it's time some of that wealth found its way back to those who need it most. A moment of silence follows as your companions absorb the implication of your words. You're talking about robbing the sheriff, Alan states finally. Not just freeing prisoners or hunting in the king's forest, but actively taking the sheriff's gold. I'm talking about returning to the people what was taken from them unjustly, you clarify, though the distinction may seem academic to some. The forest laws, the tax collections, they're crushing ordinary folk who've done nothing wrong except try to survive. Little John studies you thoughtfully. That's a different kind of outlawry altogether. It would make us the sheriff's prime targets. We already are, Will points out with a grim smile. Might as well earn the bounty on our heads. The discussion continues as you eat your own meal, weighing risks against necessity, moral imperative against practical concerns. By the time the simple stew is gone, a new purpose has taken shape among you, not just survival in the greenwood, but active resistance against the injustice that drove you there. The afternoon brings practical tasks. The confiscated weapons need to be cleaned and assessed. The horses require proper care if they're to be useful. Edward needs instruction in the basics of forest survival if he's to join your band. Each man takes up his role without need for direction, the months of living together having established a natural rhythm to your cooperation. You take the opportunity to inventory the small pouch of coins taken from the guards. It's not much, perhaps enough to buy a few days' food for a village family, but it represents something significant, the first fruits of your new resolve to take from those who have too much and give to those who have too little. As you count the coins, Edward approaches hesitantly. "I've been thinking about what you said," he begins, "about getting a message to my family." You look up, pocketing the coins. "We can arrange it. Alan often travels to villages in the guise of a minstrel. He can deliver word to your wife. I want them to join me," Edward says, determination hardening his features. "In the forest, if that's the only option. I won't abandon them to the sheriff's mercy." You understand his resolve all too well. "It won't be easy," you warn. "Winter in Sherwood is harsh, even for those accustomed to it." "Harsher than watching your children slowly starve because the sheriff takes half of everything you grow," Edward counters. "Harsher than wondering each day if this is the day the tax collectors return and find the last pig you've hidden to feed your family." His words strike a chord, reminding you why you chose this path in the first place. The law, meant to protect, had become a weapon against the very people it should serve. The King's Forest, once a common resource where villagers could gather firewood and hunt small game for the pot, had become forbidden territory where a man could lose his hand for taking a rabbit. "We'll get them out," you promise, "but we need to be careful. The sheriff will be watching the villages closely after today's events." Edward nods, relief softening the lines of worry on his face. "Thank you for everything." As he walks away, Little John joins you, watching Edward's retreating figure. "Another family in the greenwood," he muses. "Soon we'll have our own village. Would that be so bad, you ask? A place where people could live freely without fear of unjust laws or greedy officials?" Little John considers this, his massive frame silhouetted against the afternoon sun filtering through the leaves. "A noble dream," he finally says, "but a dream nonetheless. The sheriff has men, weapons, the king's authority. We have boughs and the cover of trees. For now, you agree, but every day brings new injustices, and with them, new allies. The people are tired of being squeezed until they bleed." Little John nods thoughtfully. "So we become their champions, the protectors of the common folk against the sheriff's oppression?" "Someone must," you reply simply. The remainder of the day passes in preparation. You decide to move deeper into the forest, away from the roads where the sheriff's men will be searching with renewed vigour. The caves have served their purpose as a temporary shelter, but they're too confining for an extended stay, especially with the addition of Edward and eventually his family. You know of a clearing several miles north near the heart of Sherwood, where the trees form a natural barrier against wind and weather. It's far from any established path, with a spring nearby for fresh water and game trails indicating good hunting. It will serve as a more permanent camp as winter approaches. The journey takes the remainder of the daylight hours, winding through the deepest parts of the forest where few dare to venture. The trees here are ancient giants, their massive trunks wider than a man can reach around, their canopies so dense that in places it seems like twilight even at midday. Moss covers the forest floor in thick carpets, muffling your footsteps and creating an almost sacred hush. Edward gazes around in wonder as you travel. "I've lived beside Sherwood all my life," he confesses, "but I've never ventured this deep." "Few do," you tell him. "The forest laws keep honest folk to the edges, and the stories of outlaws and spirits scare away the rest." "Stories of men like you?" Edward asks with a hint of a smile. "Perhaps," you acknowledge, "though I suspect those tales grow more fantastic with each retelling. I've heard that Robin Hood can split an arrow at 100 paces and has never missed a shot." Little John, overhearing, laughs. "Tell that to the deer that escaped you last week." The gentle ribbing continues as you make your way through the forest, the camaraderie helping to ease the tension of the morning's confrontation. By the time you reach the clearing you had in mind, the sun is setting, casting long shadows through the trees. The clearing appears much as you remembered it, a natural opening in the forest about 50 paces across, surrounded by massive oaks and beeches. The spring bubbles up from between moss-covered rocks at one edge, forming a small stream that winds away into the trees. The ground is relatively level, carpeted with soft grass rather than the tangled undergrowth that dominates much of the forest floor. This will do, you decide, setting down your pack. We'll make camp here tonight and begin building something more permanent tomorrow. As the others begin the familiar routine of setting up camp, you take a moment to stand alone at the edge of the clearing, watching the last light fade from the sky. The day's events replay in your mind: the ambush, the confrontation with the sheriff's men, the decision to actively oppose rather than merely evade. You've crossed a threshold today, though perhaps the path was inevitable from the moment you chose outlawry over submission to an unjust punishment. Still, there's something significant in the deliberate choice to become not just an outlaw, but a champion for those oppressed by the very laws that should protect them. The sound of Alan tuning his lute draws your attention back to the camp. Despite the day's exertions and the seriousness of your discussions, there's a lighter mood among your band tonight. Perhaps it's the success of the rescue, or the newfound purpose that seems to have energized everyone. Whatever the cause, you welcome it. As darkness falls completely, Much gets a small fire going, carefully tended to produce minimal smoke. The flames cast dancing shadows on the faces gathered around, highlighting expressions that seem more hopeful than you've seen in some time. Alan begins to play, his fingers drawing a lilting melody from the lute strings. It's a folk tune you recognise, one sung in village taverns throughout the region, but the words he sings are new. In Sherwood Forest, green and deep, where shadows dance and secrets keep, there lives a band of righteous men who take from rich to give again. Their leader, bold with bow in hand, defends the poor throughout the land. Robin Hood, the people's friend, on whom the helpless may depend. The impromptu ballad continues, recounting the day's rescue in terms far more heroic than the reality. By the final verse, Edward is wiping away tears, and even the usually stoic Will is smiling. Is that how they'll remember us, do you think? Much asks when the song ends. As heroes? That depends on who's doing the remembering, you reply. To the sheriff, we'll always be criminals. To those we help, perhaps something else. The conversation turns to plans for the new camp, what structures you'll need before winter sets in, how to make them weather-tight yet concealable, where to position lookouts. The practical concerns of survival haven't vanished with your new purpose. If anything, they've become more complex with the addition of Edward and soon his family. As the fire burns low and the night deepens, your companions gradually retire to their bedrolls, exhausted from the day's events. You take the first watch, as you often do, settling with your back against a massive oak at the edge of the clearing. The forest at night is never truly silent. Owls call from the branches above, their haunting voices carrying through the darkness. Small creatures rustle in the underbrush, going about their nocturnal business. The leaves whisper as a gentle breeze passes through the canopy. A soothing, almost musical sound. These night sounds have become familiar, even comforting during your time in Sherwood. What once seemed ominous or alien now feels like the natural rhythm of the world, a rhythm you've become attuned to through necessity and constant exposure. Your thoughts drift to what lies ahead. The sheriff will not take today's defiance lightly. The guards you humiliated will tell their tale, perhaps embellished to save face, and the hunt for Robin Hood will intensify. You've chosen a more dangerous path, one that puts not just yourself, but all who follow you at greater risk. And yet, as you watch the sleeping forms of your companions, illuminated faintly by the dying embers of the fire, you feel a certainty that the choice is right. These men, and soon women and children too, have placed their trust in you, not just to lead them in survival, but to stand for something greater. The weight of that responsibility settles over you like a physical thing, yet it doesn't feel burdensome. Instead, it grounds you, gives purpose to the hardships and dangers of outlaw life. You are no longer just Robin the fugitive, but Robin Hood, defender of the oppressed, challenger of unjust authority. The mantle of legend begins to form around your shoulders, though you don't recognize it yet. In years to come, your name will echo through forest and village, whispered with hope by the downtrodden and with fear by those who abuse their power. But tonight, you are simply a man keeping watch in the darkness, protecting those who have come to depend on you. As the night deepens and the stars wheel overhead, visible in patches through the forest canopy, you find a moment's peace in the quiet certainty of your chosen path. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new dangers, perhaps new allies. But for now, in this clearing deep in the heart of Sherwood, you have found not just shelter, but purpose. The owl calls again, closer this time, its voice carrying through the darkness like a blessing or a promise. You listen, your body gradually relaxing as the familiar night sounds wash over you, your eyelids growing heavy despite your determination to remain alert. In this moment between wakefulness and dreams, the forest seems to whisper its approval of your choice, the ancient trees bearing witness to the birth of a legend that will outlive them all. Winter descends on Sherwood Forest with unforgiving swiftness. One day the leaves are a riot of crimson and gold. The next, a bitter wind strips the branches bare, leaving skeletal fingers reaching toward a pewter sky. The first snow comes earlier than expected, dusting the forest floor with white that crunches beneath your boots. You stand at the edge of the camp, watching your breath cloud in the frigid air. The weeks since rescuing Edward have passed in a blur of preparation. Your band has grown, not just with Edward's family, who arrived under cover of darkness a fortnight ago, guided by Alan through the forest paths, but with 3 more men who sought you out after hearing tales of Robin Hood's defiance of the sheriff. The camp has transformed from a simple clearing to something resembling a small settlement. Low shelters made of woven branches and packed earth form a rough circle around the central fire pit. They're not cottages, not truly, but they offer more protection from the elements than sleeping under the stars. The roofs are thatched with reeds from the nearby stream, layered thick to shed rain and snow, and the walls are chinked with moss and clay to keep out the wind. Edward's wife, Mary, approaches quietly to stand beside you, her thin woolen shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. Her face, once soft with village life, has already begun to harden with the realities of forest existence, but there's a determination in her eyes that reminds you of Marion. "Will it be enough?" she asks, nodding toward the shelters. The children have never weathered a winter outside village walls. The question weighs heavily. Edward and Mary have 3 children, the youngest barely 5 summers old, the eldest a girl of 12, who watches everything with solemn eyes. They're thin, all of them, from months of insufficient food in the village, but they've begun to fill out since joining your camp. The forest has been generous in its final abundance before winter. Deer, rabbits, wild onions, and the last of the autumn berries. "We've done all we can," you answer honestly. "The shelters are sturdy. We have meat smoked and dried, nuts stored away, and the spring doesn't freeze even in the deepest cold. What you don't say is that winter in Sherwood is a bitter enemy that cannot be defeated, only endured. That no matter how much you prepare, there will be days of gnawing hunger, nights of bone-deep cold, times when it seems the darkness and chill will never end." Mary seems to hear these unspoken truths anyway. She nods, her gaze travelling to where her children help little John stack the last of the firewood under a crude lean-to that will keep it relatively dry. Better to face it free than warm in bondage, she says finally. In the village we would have starved by midwinter. The sheriff's men took so much. Her voice trails off, but the bitterness remains. It's a sentiment you've heard echoed by every new arrival to your band. The sheriff's taxation has grown increasingly oppressive, taking not just a portion but nearly everything from those least able to spare it. We won't starve here, you promise, though you know it might be a promise you can't keep. And come spring, we'll do more than just survive. We'll make the sheriff regret his greed. Mary's lips curve in a small, fierce smile. The children already sing Alan's song about Robin Hood. They believe you can do anything. The weight of that faith settles on your shoulders like a physical thing. These people have abandoned what little security they had to follow you into the wilderness, trusting that you'll lead them through the winter, that your defiance of the sheriff's authority will somehow make their hardships worthwhile. I'm just a man, you remind her, feeling the need to temper expectations. I can't promise miracles. No one expects miracles, she replies, her gaze direct. Just justice, and that's something the sheriff's law doesn't provide anymore. Before you can respond, a sharp whistle cuts through the cold air, the signal from Will, who's on watch at the northern edge of the camp. 2 short notes followed by a longer one, a visitor approaching, not considered an immediate threat. Your hand goes automatically to your bow as you move toward the source of the signal, Mary already hurrying to gather her children into one of the shelters. The camp erupts into quiet, efficient movement, weapons readied, the most vulnerable hidden positions taken that would allow for either defense or swift retreat if necessary. Will materializes from between the trees, his expression neutral but his posture tense. Friar, he reports simply, coming along the stream path, alone as far as I can tell. You nod, some of the tension easing from your shoulders. A lone friar is unlikely to pose a physical threat, though he could certainly report your location to the sheriff if allowed to leave freely. Still, the wandering holy men have generally been allies rather than enemies to your band, bringing news from the villages and occasionally small amounts of food or medicine. I'll meet him, you decide. Little John with me, the rest of you stay alert. Little John falls into step beside you, his quarterstaff held casually but ready. Together you move through the winter-bare forest toward the small stream that provides your camp with water. The ground is hard beneath your boots, frozen in the late autumn chill, the thin covering of snow crunching softly with each step. You spot the friar before he sees you, a round figure in a brown robe, the hood pulled up against the cold. He moves slowly along the stream bank, occasionally stopping to examine something on the ground or in the water. There's something familiar about his gait, the way he holds his head. Tuck, you call out, the name coming to you suddenly. The figure straightens and turns, the hood falling back to reveal a round face with a fringe of greying hair and bright, intelligent eyes. "Robin!" he exclaims, his voice carrying in the still air. "I thought I might find you hereabouts." Friar Tuck was once the chaplain at a small monastery near Loxley before it was dissolved in a dispute with the bishop. Since then he's wandered the forests and villages, offering spiritual comfort and practical help where he can. You've encountered him several times since becoming an outlaw, always finding him a source of reliable information and unexpected wisdom. You're far from the roads, Tuck, you observe as you approach, clasping his hand in greeting. Not many travel this deep into Sherwood, especially with winter coming on. "Ah, but I was looking for you specifically," Tuck replies, reaching into his robe to produce a small package wrapped in oiled cloth. "And I bring gifts, or rather, I deliver them." Your heart quickens. "From whom?" Tuck's eyes crinkle with understanding. A certain lady of Locksley, who asks after your health most particularly whenever I pass through the village. Marion. The knowledge that she still thinks of you, still cares enough to send gifts through Tuck, warms you more effectively than any fire could. You accept the package with hands that you force to remain steady. She is well, you ask, trying to keep your voice casual. As well as can be expected, Tuck answers, his expression sobering. The sheriff's men watch her still, thinking she might lead them to you, but she's careful, and she has friends in the village who warn her when strangers approach. And my son. Growing strong, Tuck says with a genuine smile. A handsome lad with his mother's wit and his father's arm. He's already showing skill with a small bow. Pride and sorrow mingle in your chest at the thought of your son learning archery without your guidance, another thing the sheriff and his unjust laws have stolen from you. Come, you say, tucking the precious package into your tunic. Our camp is nearby. You look like you could use a warm fire and a meal. Tuck follows willingly, chatting with Little John about mundane matters as you lead the way back to camp. But once you're seated near the central fire, a wooden bowl of rabbit stew warming his hands, his expression turns serious. I bring news as well as gifts, he announces, looking around at the gathered faces of your band, and I'm afraid it's not good. The atmosphere around the fire shifts, the brief relaxation brought by Tuck's familiar presence giving way to renewed tension. The sheriff has declared a new tax, Tuck continues, his voice low but carrying to all who listen. A winter tithe, he calls it, though it has nothing to do with the church. 1/5 of all stored food to be collected before the first heavy snow. Murmurs of anger and disbelief ripple through your band. Winter is already the leanest time for village families. To take 1/5 of their carefully preserved stores is to condemn many to hunger, perhaps even starvation. He claims it's to provision his men for increased patrols. Tuck explains, his own disgust evident. Patrols to catch outlaws, he says. But everyone knows the food will go to his own table, to fund his Christmas feasting while the people who grew it go hungry. Your hand tightens on your bow, knuckles whitening with suppressed rage. This is beyond mere taxation. It's cruelty disguised as law. When do the collections begin, you ask, mind already racing with possibilities. They've started in the eastern villages, Tuck replies. Locksley will be among the last, perhaps 3 days from now. 3 days. Not much time to plan, but perhaps enough. What are you thinking, Robin? Little John asks, knowing the look on your face all too well. I'm thinking it's time the sheriff's men learned that taking from those who have little comes with consequences, you answer, the beginnings of a plan taking shape. I'm thinking it's time Robin Hood truly earned his reputation. The discussion that follows is intense, with various members of your band offering suggestions, pointing out potential problems, debating the risks versus the necessity. Tuck listens silently for a time before clearing his throat. If I may, he says, drawing all eyes to him, the people already speak of you as a defender against injustice. The tale of how you rescued Edward has spread to every village in the Shire, but tales alone won't feed hungry children when the snow lies deep. What are you suggesting, Friar? You ask, though you suspect you know. That Robin Hood become more than just a defiant outlaw, Tuck says simply, that he become a symbol of hope, not just by opposing the sheriff's men, but by actively helping those they harm. It's the same conclusion you've been moving toward since the day you rescued Edward. Not just survival in the Greenwood, not just occasional defiance of unjust authority, but a deliberate campaign to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The winter tax, you say slowly, if we could take it back from the sheriff's men and return it to the villages, it would be dangerous, Will warns, though his expression suggests he's not opposed to the idea. The collections will be heavily guarded. All the more reason to strike early, you counter, before they expect resistance, before they consolidate the collected food in Nottingham Castle, where we couldn't hope to reach it. The planning continues late into the night, growing more detailed as the enormity of what you're proposing becomes clear. This won't be a simple ambush like the one that freed Edward. This will be a direct challenge to the sheriff's authority, a public declaration that Robin Hood and his band are not just fugitives but active opponents of the regime. By the time the fire burns low, a plan has taken shape. You'll intercept the tax collectors after they leave Locksley, but before they reach the next village. The location is perfect, a narrow section of road bordered by dense forest on both sides, offering cover for your archers and limiting the manoeuvrability of the sheriff's mounted men. The risks are significant. The tax collectors will be well armed and likely numerous. If any escape to raise the alarm, the sheriff could deploy enough men to sweep the forest systematically, perhaps even finding your hidden camp. And if you're captured, well, a quick death would be the best you could hope for. But the alternative, doing nothing while village families starve because the sheriff takes food from their winter stores, is unthinkable. As the others gradually retire to their shelters, you remain by the dying fire, turning the plan over in your mind, looking for weaknesses, for contingencies you haven't considered. Tuck joins you, his round face serious in the fading firelight. "You've changed," he observes quietly. "The Robin I knew in Locksley would never have imagined himself leading men against the sheriff's authority. The world changed around me," you reply, poking at the embers with a stick. "Or perhaps I simply saw it more clearly once I was outside the protection of its laws." Tuck nods thoughtfully. The law should protect the weak from the strong, not give the strong tools to further oppress the weak. When it fails in that purpose, it loses its moral authority. "Is that the Church's teaching, Friar?" you ask with a small smile. "It's my teaching," Tuck responds, returning your smile briefly before growing serious again. "But you should know that not all in the Church would agree. The bishop, for instance, dines regularly with the sheriff and benefits from his taxation. And yet you're here, helping outlaws plan what amounts to robbery." "I'm helping good people prevent starvation," Tuck corrects. "The crime lies with those who would take food from hungry children, not with those who try to stop them." His certainty is comforting, quieting the small voice of doubt that sometimes whispers in your mind during the dark hours. You were raised to respect authority, to honour the king's law. The transition to outlaw was born of necessity rather than choice. But this new step, actively opposing the sheriff's men, taking back what they've collected, is a deliberate choice that can't be easily justified as mere survival. "Get some rest," Tuck advises, rising with a grunt of effort. "You'll need your wits about you in the days to come." You nod, but remain by the fire after he's gone, one hand absently touching the package from Marion still tucked inside your tunic. Only when the fire has died to mere embers do you finally unwrap it, fingers careful with the oiled cloth that has protected its contents from the damp. Inside is a small wooden pendant on a leather cord, a carving of a running stag. The work simple but beautifully executed. You recognise it immediately as Marion's handiwork. She had always been skilled with a small knife, creating delicate figures from scraps of wood while sitting by the fire in your cottage. Beneath the pendant is a piece of linen carefully folded. You unfold it to find a few words written in charcoal in Marion's neat hand. "We are well. He asks about you. Stay safe." Just 9 words, but they pierce your heart more effectively than any arrow. You trace the letters with a calloused fingertip, feeling both closer to and further from your family than ever. They are well. Your son asks about you. Marion still cares enough to risk sending messages. It's both comfort and torment, this tenuous connection to the life you left behind. You slip the pendant over your head, tucking it beneath your tunic where it rests against your heart. The message you fold carefully and place in the small leather pouch at your belt. alongside the few other treasures you've managed to keep during your time in the Greenwood. Sleep, when it finally comes, is fitful and filled with dreams of home, of Marian's face, of a small boy with your features asking questions you can't answer. Morning brings a fresh dusting of snow and renewed purpose. The camp stirs early, everyone aware of the urgency of your mission. Preparations are made with quiet efficiency, arrows checked and counted, bowstrings waxed to protect them from the damp, plans reviewed and roles assigned. You'll take only your original band plus 2 of the newcomers who've proven themselves with bow and blade. The rest, including Edward and his family, will remain at camp, ready to flee deeper into the forest if you don't return by nightfall. Mary catches your arm as you're about to leave, her expression fierce. "Bring them back," she says simply. "All of you." You nod, making no promises you might not be able to keep. She understands, releasing you with a tight smile before turning back to her children. The journey to the road near Loxley takes most of the day, though it's not far as the crow flies. You move cautiously, avoiding the more travelled paths where you might encounter foresters or other agents of the sheriff. The forest is different in winter, more open with the leaves gone, making concealment harder but visibility better. You use both to your advantage, keeping to the densest parts of the underbrush when possible, but using the improved sight lines to spot potential danger from a distance. By late afternoon, you're in position along the road, concealed among the trees that crowd close to the packed earth path. The weather has turned colder, the earlier snow now frozen into a crust that crunches underfoot if you're not careful. Your breath forms small clouds in the air, and you pull your cloak tighter against the chill. The waiting is always the hardest part. Your muscles grow stiff in the cold, and it takes conscious effort to flex them periodically, ensuring you'll be ready to move quickly when the time comes. Your mind drifts despite your best efforts, returning to the small camp in the heart of Sherwood, to Marian's message, to the weight of responsibility you've taken on. The sound of approaching horses snaps you back to full alertness. You signal silently to your hidden companions, then peer carefully through the screen of bare branches that conceals your position. They appear around the bend in the road, 6 mounted men-at-arms in the sheriff's livery, surrounding a large cart drawn by a pair of plough horses. The cart is laden with sacks and barrels, the winter tithe collected from Loxley and perhaps other villages already. 6 guards. More than you expected, but not enough to make you reconsider. Your band is evenly matched in numbers, and you have the advantage of surprise and position. You wait until the cart is directly opposite your hiding place before standing and stepping onto the road, bow in hand but arrow not yet nocked. The guards react immediately, hands going to sword hilts, eyes widening in recognition as they take in your distinctive Lincoln green tunic and the longbow that has become synonymous with Robin Hood. "Hold," you call out, your voice carrying clearly in the still winter air. "I have no quarrel with you men personally, but I cannot allow you to take food from those who will starve without it." The lead guard, a grizzled veteran with a scar running along his jawline, laughs harshly. "Bold words from one man against 6, Hood. Who said I was alone?" you reply, as your companions emerge from the trees on both sides of the road, bows drawn and aimed at the guards. The guards tense, some drawing swords partially before realizing they're surrounded and outmatched. Arrows against swords in open ground is no contest, and they know it. The sheriff won't take kindly to this, the lead guard warns, though his posture suggests he's already considering surrender. He'll hang every man in Loxley to find those who helped you. "No one in Loxley helped me," you reply truthfully. "This is between the sheriff and Robin Hood. Tell him that when you return to Nottingham." "Return?" the guard asks, confusion evident. "You're letting us go?" "Once we've relieved you of your cargo, yes," you confirm. "I have no desire to shed blood unnecessarily. Surrender the cart, and you can return to Nottingham unharmed." There's a moment of tense silence as the guards exchange glances, weighing their options. Then the leader gives a curt nod and they begin to dismount slowly, hands held away from their weapons. Wise choice, you acknowledge, finally allowing yourself to breathe normally again. You hadn't been certain they would yield without a fight. Little John and Will move forward to secure the guards' weapons while you examine the cart's contents. As suspected, it contains foodstuffs of various kinds, sacks of grain and dried beans, barrels of preserved meat, bundles of dried herbs and vegetables. A fifth of every family's winter stores taken by force of law. This goes back to Locksley tonight, you decide aloud, and then to the other villages the sheriff has taxed. How? Alan asks practically. We can hardly drive the cart up to the village square, with the sheriff's men watching for us. It's a fair question, and one you've considered during the long hours of planning. We don't need to enter the village, you explain. Just leave portions along the forest edge where they're sure to be found. Word will spread quickly enough about where the food came from. The plan is executed with efficiency born of necessity. The guards are bound but not mistreated, left a safe distance from the road where they'll eventually be found by a patrol or manage to free themselves. Their horses are taken, both to prevent immediate pursuit and because they'll be useful to your band, but their personal possessions are left untouched. The cart is driven deeper into the forest, following game trails wide enough to accommodate its width. As darkness falls, you reach a point where Sherwood borders Locksley's common fields. Here, you unload a portion of the reclaimed food, arranging it carefully at the forest's edge where villagers coming to cut firewood will find it in the morning. With each sack and barrel you place, you include a small token, a leaf painted with a simple hooded figure, a sign that this comes from Robin Hood. It's Alan's idea, a way to ensure the sheriff can't claim credit for returning what his men took. The work continues into the night, moving from village to village along Sherwood's perimeter, leaving portions of the reclaimed food where it will be found. By the time the cart is empty, the moon is high in the clear winter sky, casting everything in silver light that makes the frosted ground sparkle like scattered diamonds. You're exhausted but exhilarated as you finally turn back toward your camp deep in the forest. This night's work will make a tangible difference to dozens of families. They'll face the winter with full storerooms instead of the gnawing hunger the sheriff's tax would have ensured. More than that, you've sent a message that will echo through every village in the Shire. Robin Hood is more than just a defiant outlaw. He's a champion for those the law no longer protects, a shadow that watches from the greenwood, ready to intervene when injustice threatens. As you ride through the midnight forest, the stolen horses moving quietly along game trails they seem to sense rather than see. You feel something shift within you. The burden of responsibility you've carried since first fleeing into Sherwood hasn't lightened. If anything, it's grown heavier with each person who has joined your band, with each action that opposes the sheriff's authority. But alongside that burden is a new sensation, a certainty that transcends the doubts that sometimes plague you in the dark hours. What you're doing is right, regardless of what the king's law might say. Protecting those who cannot protect themselves is a higher law than any proclaimed by distant lords or enforced by corrupt officials. Robin Hood is no longer just your name. It's becoming something larger, a symbol that exists beyond your own flesh and blood, a promise that injustice will not go unchallenged, that the strong will not always prey upon the weak with impunity. It's a heady realization, one that carries you through the cold night ride back to camp, where eager faces await news of your success or failure, where Mary and her children, Edward and the other newcomers, Friar Tuck with his quiet wisdom, all look to you for leadership, for protection, for hope in the face of a harsh winter and a harsher regime. As the camp comes into view, its small fires glowing like earthbound stars in the darkness, you know with bone-deep certainty that you're exactly where you're meant to be. Not in a comfortable cottage in Loxley Village, not even with Marion and your son, but here in the heart of Sherwood, standing against injustice with every arrow you loose. The legend of Robin Hood is born this night, though you don't yet recognise it. In years to come, long after your own time has passed, men will still speak of the outlaw who took from the rich to give to the poor, who made the greenwood his kingdom and justice his creed. But for now, you are simply a tired man returning to camp after a successful mission, eager for food and rest and the company of those who have become your family in exile. The weight of the wooden pendant against your chest reminds you of what you've lost, but the grateful faces that greet your return speak to what you've gained. As you dismount and hand the reins to a waiting Edward, Friar Tuck approaches, his expression questioning. "It's done," you tell him simply. "The food is returned." Tuck's face breaks into a wide smile, and he clasps your shoulder with surprising strength. Then Robin Hood has truly earned his place in the people's hearts this night. You nod, too tired for words, but warmed by the approval in his eyes. The approval of a man of God means more than you might have expected, particularly for actions that technically violate the king's law. As the camp settles into celebration of your successful mission, you find a quiet moment to stand alone at its edge, looking up at the winter stars that seem close enough to touch in the crystal clear sky. The forest stretches around you, ancient and patient, its bare branches etched against the darkness like a complex network of veins carrying life even in the depths of winter's sleep. This is your home now, this wild place that exists beyond the reach of unjust laws. Not just a refuge, but a vantage point, a place from which to observe the world's inequities and, when possible, to balance the scales. Robin Hood, the forest's son, defender of the defenceless. The mantle settles around your shoulders like a cloak, heavy but necessary, as the winter wind whispers through the trees, carrying the promise of snow and the hope of justice to come. Spring comes to Sherwood Forest with tentative warmth that gradually drives the winter chill from the earth. The first tiny leaves appear on the barren branches, impossibly vibrant against the browns and greys of the forest. Snowdrops and early crocuses push through the last patches of melting snow, their delicate blooms a promise of renewal after the long cold. You stand at the edge of your camp, watching the forest come alive around you with a sense of quiet wonder. The winter has been harsh, as winters in England always are. There were days when the snow piled so deep that leaving the shelters was nearly impossible, when the wind howled through the trees with a voice like a hungry wolf, when food stores dwindled dangerously low despite careful rationing. Yet you've survived. All of you, not just survived, but in some ways thrived. Your band has grown through the winter months as word spread of Robin Hood's defiance of the sheriff and his protection of those the law has abandoned. 3 more families joined you shortly after the winter tax incident, then a young couple fleeing an arranged marriage, then a skilled blacksmith whose forge was confiscated when he couldn't pay his taxes. The camp has expanded accordingly, new shelters built as the weather allowed, hunting and gathering territories carefully mapped to ensure sustainable use of the forest's bounty. What began as a handful of desperate outlaws has become something akin to a small village hidden within the heart of Sherwood. Thinking deep thoughts? Comes Little John's rumbling voice as he joins you, his massive frame seeming somehow in perfect harmony with the ancient trees surrounding you. Wondering what summer will bring, you reply, nodding toward the signs of spring's advance. The forest offers more cover when in full leaf, but also brings more travellers through Sherwood, more of the sheriff's men as well. Little John nods, understanding the implications. Winter provided a natural protection. Few ventured deep into the snow-covered forest, allowing your growing band a measure of security. The warmer months will bring increased risk of discovery, but also more opportunities to continue the work that has increasingly defined your purpose. The people call you the Prince of Thieves now, Little John says with a slight smile. Alan heard it in Nottingham Market. They say you can shoot an arrow through the sheriff's window from a mile away and steal the coins from his purse while he sleeps. You laugh, shaking your head at the absurdity. The tales grow taller with each telling. Tales serve their purpose, comes Friar Tuck's voice as he approaches. Having overheard the exchange, the holy man has remained with your band through the winter, his practical knowledge and spiritual guidance proving invaluable during the darkest days. They give hope to those who have little else. Hope won't fill empty bellies, you point out, though without bitterness. No, Tuck agrees, but it might give a hungry man the courage to share what little he has, knowing that Robin Hood fights for justice in the greenwood. There's truth in his words, you know. The legend that has grown around your name serves a purpose beyond mere entertainment. It reminds the oppressed that they're not forgotten, that someone stands ready to intervene when the law itself becomes a tool of oppression rather than protection. The three of you walk back toward the camp where the daily activities are in full swing. Mary and the other women attending the communal cooking fire where a pot of pottage simmers filled with the first spring greens and what remains of the winter's preserved meat. Children run between the shelters, their games involving elaborate scenarios where Robin Hood's band defeats the sheriff's men in increasingly fantastic ways. Edward and the blacksmith, Simon, work at a small forge they've constructed well away from the main camp, the smoke from its fire carefully dispersed to avoid creating a visible plume that might attract unwanted attention. They're fashioning arrowheads from what metal you've been able to acquire. Some traded for with the surplus from successful hunts, some taken from the sheriff's men during confrontations. Will Scarlet approaches as you enter the clearing, his scarred face serious. "Scouts have returned," he reports without preamble. "Attacks caravan on the North Road, heavily guarded." Your pulse quickens at the news. Since the winter tax incident, you've intercepted 3 more caravans carrying collected taxes or supplies for the sheriff's men. Each success has further cemented Robin Hood's reputation among the common folk, while increasing the sheriff's determination to capture you. How heavily guarded, you ask, the tactical considerations already forming in your mind. 10 mounted men-at-arms, Will answers. Chainmail, swords, 3 with crossbows, escorting 2 wagons covered with oiled cloth. Contents unknown, but the way they're guarded suggests value. 10 against your usual raiding party of 6 or 7. Poor odds, especially with crossbows involved. The mechanical weapons lack the range and accuracy of your longbows, but require far less training to use effectively, making them the preferred choice for the sheriff's less skilled men. When will they pass the Gallows Oak crossing? You ask, referring to a spot on the North Road that has proven advantageous for previous ambushes. By midday tomorrow, if they maintain their current pace, Will replies. You nod, considering. Too many for a direct confrontation. We'll need a different approach. The planning session that follows involves your core band, those who've been with you from the beginning, whose skills and judgment you trust implicitly. Ideas are proposed, debated, refined, and occasionally discarded as impractical or too risky. What about the ravine passage? Little John suggests eventually. The road narrows there with steep slopes on either side. Even mounted men would struggle to manoeuvre effectively. The ravine has only one exit, Will counters, always the strategic thinker. If we're discovered before the wagons enter, we'd be trapped. Not if we create a diversion at the entrance first, you muse, an idea taking shape. Something to draw the guards' attention, make them focus on the wrong threat. The plan gradually coalesces. Alan, disguised as a simple traveller, will appear to be robbed by Will and Much at the entrance to the ravine, creating a disturbance that draws the guards' attention. Meanwhile, you, Little John, and two others will position yourselves along the ravine walls, ready to disable the wagons and overwhelm the remaining guards once they've entered the narrow passage. As the details are finalised, Friar Tuck watches with a thoughtful expression. "Have you considered," he asks during a lull in the discussion, "what these wagons might contain? If it's simply the sheriff's gold, that's one matter, but if it's supplies intended for the castle garrison..." The implication is clear. Taking gold from the sheriff to return to the overtaxed people is central to your mission, but interfering with supplies for the king's soldiers, men who serve the crown, rather than the sheriff personally, edges closer to treason than mere outlawry. "We'll assess the contents before deciding," you determine after a moment's consideration. "If it's tax money or the sheriff's personal goods, we take it. If it's military supplies or provisions for the general garrison, we let it pass." The others nod in agreement, understanding the distinction. Your quarrel is with the sheriff and his abuse of power, not with the crown itself. Despite your outlaw status, you still consider yourself a loyal subject of King Richard, awaiting his return from the Crusades to set right the injustices that have flourished under his brother's regency. As the meeting concludes and your companions disperse to prepare for tomorrow's mission, Tuck remains, his expression suggesting he has more to say. "What's troubling you, Friar?" you ask, recognizing the familiar furrow between his brows. "Nothing you haven't already considered, I'm sure," he replies, falling into step beside you as you walk toward the quiet edge of the camp. "But I wonder about the path you're on, Robin. Each successful raid against the sheriff's men emboldens you, drives you to take greater risks." "Someone must stand against injustice," you remind him, echoing a sentiment you've expressed before. "Indeed," Tuck agrees, "but at what cost to yourself? To those who follow you? The sheriff's determination to capture Robin Hood grows with each humiliation you inflict upon him." You stop walking, turning to face him directly. "Would you have me do nothing? Watch from the safety of the greenwood while families starve because the sheriff takes what little they have?" "Of course not," Tuck says, his voice gentle but firm. "I merely suggest that there may be other ways to help those in need, ways that don't involve direct confrontation with armed men. The network of support you've built among the villagers, the safe haven you provide here in the forest, these things matter too." His words give you pause. Tuck has a gift for cutting to the heart of matters, for seeing beyond the immediate satisfaction of action to the broader consequences. The reputation of Robin Hood now extends far beyond Sherwood, with tales of your exploits told in taverns and around hearthfires throughout the Shire and beyond. That reputation has power, perhaps more than you fully appreciated. "What would you suggest?" you ask, genuinely curious. Tuck strokes his chin thoughtfully. "The sheriff's power lies in fear as much as in armed men. Fear keeps the villagers from resisting his excessive taxation, from speaking out against injustices, but fear can be overcome by hope, by the knowledge that they are not alone. And Robin Hood gives them that hope," you conclude, understanding his point. "Exactly. The legend may ultimately prove more powerful than the man. Consider how you might use that legend to inspire resistance beyond what you and your band can accomplish directly." The conversation stays with you as you prepare for the next day's mission, checking your bow, selecting arrows, ensuring your small knife is sharp and secure in its sheath. Tuck's perspective adds a new dimension to your thinking, not just about tomorrow's ambush, but about the purpose your outlaw existence has gradually assumed. You sleep fitfully that night. Your dreams a confused jumble of images: Marion's face, the sheriff's sneer, a stag running through moonlit woods, an arrow in flight that never reaches its target. You wake before dawn, the camp still quiet around you except for the soft footsteps of the night watch being relieved by the morning sentries. A light mist clings to the forest floor as your raiding party sets out, weaving between ancient trees that drip with dew. The early spring sun struggles to penetrate the dissipating fog, creating an ethereal quality to the familiar woodland. Your breath still forms small clouds in the cool morning air, but there's a promise of warmth in the gentle breeze that occasionally stirs the branches above. You travel swiftly but cautiously, using the natural features of the forest to conceal your passage. By mid-morning, you've reached the vicinity of the ravine, where you plan to intercept the tax caravan. It's a natural formation where the land falls away sharply on either side of the road, creating a passage about 100 yards long with steep wooded slopes rising 20 feet or more above the packed earth path. You separate according to the plan, each person taking up their assigned position with practiced efficiency. Alan continues along the road, his lute slung across his back, the picture of a harmless travelling minstrel. Will and Much conceal themselves near the entrance to the ravine, ready to stage their fake robbery when the caravan approaches. You, Little John, and 2 others climb the slopes to position yourselves along the ravine walls, hidden among the trees and brush that provide cover even in the early stages of spring growth. The waiting is always the hardest part. Your muscles grow tense from holding still for so long, and your mind fills with contingencies, imagined scenarios, potential complications. What if the guards don't fall for the diversion? What if there are more men than your scouts observed? What if the wagons contain something unexpected? The sound of approaching hooves and creaking wagon wheels snaps you back to full alertness. You peer carefully through the screen of young leaves that conceals your position, watching as the caravan comes into view along the road. The guards match Will's description. 10 mounted men in the sheriff's livery, chainmail glinting in the strengthening sunlight, swords at their sides and shields bearing the sheriff's emblem slung across their backs. 3 indeed carry crossbows, though the weapons are currently unloaded, balanced across their saddles. The 2 wagons follow, heavy wooden constructions with high sides covered by oiled cloth to protect their contents from the elements. Each is drawn by a team of 4 horses, suggesting significant weight. As the caravan approaches the entrance to the ravine, Alan appears on the road ahead, walking with the unhurried gait of a man without pressing concerns. He appears to notice the approaching guards, stepping to the side of the road to let them pass, his posture carefully crafted to project harmless deference. The timing is perfect. Just as the lead guards draw level with Alan, Will and Much burst from the underbrush, brandishing their weapons and shouting demands for the minstrel's valuables. The commotion immediately draws the attention of the guards, several calling out warnings as they reach for their weapons. The diversion works exactly as planned. While the guards at the front of the caravan focus on the apparent robbery, you and your companions on the ravine slopes prepare to strike. The wagons continue into the narrow passage, flanked by the remaining guards, who are now on high alert, but looking outward rather than up. You wait until the wagons are fully within the ravine before giving the signal, a bird call that sounds natural to untrained ears but carries specific meaning to your band. At the sound, Little John and 1 companion launch the first phase of the attack, sending carefully prepared bundles of branches and stones tumbling down the slope behind the caravan, effectively blocking the path back to the main road. The The guards react with predictable confusion, wheeling their horses to face this new threat. In that moment of disorientation, you and your other companion loose your first arrows, aiming not for the men, but for the wagon teams. The arrows strike the ground directly in front of the lead horses, causing them to rear in fright, further adding to the chaos. The battle that follows is brief but intense. The guards, realizing they're under attack from the ravine slopes, attempt to organize a defense, but their position is fundamentally disadvantageous. Your elevated position allows you to fire down upon them with relative impunity, while they struggle to maneuver their horses in the narrow space. 2 guards fall to your arrows, non-lethal shots to the shoulder and leg that disable without killing. Another is knocked from his saddle by a well-aimed stone from your companion's sling. Little John and his partner descend the slope in a controlled slide, entering the fray directly. Their longer weapons, quarterstaff and spear, providing reach advantage against the mounted men's swords. From the ravine entrance comes the sound of further fighting as Will and Much engage the guards who responded to the initial diversion. Alan's voice rises in convincing terror, adding to the impression that he's simply an unfortunate traveller caught in the middle. Within minutes, it's over. The guards are disarmed and secured, their horses scattered but not harmed. The wagons stand in the middle of the ravine, their teams still hitched but now calm under Much's experienced handling. None of the guards are seriously injured. A deliberate choice on your part. Dead men create vendettas and intensified manhunts. Living men who've been humiliated but spared might seed doubt about the wisdom of opposing Robin Hood too vigorously. You approach the wagons cautiously, bow still in hand, alert for any hidden dangers. The oiled cloth covering is secured with ropes which you cut with your knife before pulling the material back to reveal the contents. What you find is both expected and surprising. The first wagon contains chests, not the iron-bound strong boxes you anticipated for tax money, but wooden crates with the sheriff's seal stamped into the lids. You pry one open to discover fine fabrics, spices, wines, and other luxury goods. The second wagon holds similar cargo, along with several ornate items that appear to be gifts or tribute of some kind. Not tax collection, Little John observes, examining a bolt of silk with calloused hands unused to such finery. These are supplies for the sheriff's household, luxuries. You nod, a slow smile spreading across your face. Even better, the people's taxes have already paid for these indulgences. We're simply redirecting them to those who truly paid the price. The decision of what to do with the captured goods is straightforward. The most practical items, fabrics that can be made into clothing, spices that can be traded for necessities, tools and household items, will be distributed to the villages most heavily taxed by the sheriff. The pure luxuries, exotic wines, ornamental items of little practical use can be traded with merchants in the larger towns for coin or supplies your forest community needs. As your band secures the valuable cargo for transport back to your hidden camp, you address the captured guards. They watch with a mixture of anger, fear, and resignation as you approach, clearly expecting the worst despite your reputation for sparing lives. Tell the sheriff you instruct them that Robin Hood thanks him for his generous contribution to the welfare of those he has taxed into poverty. Tell him also that while he dines on rich foods in his castle, the people he has sworn to protect go hungry, and that such injustice will never go unchallenged while I draw breath in Sherwood. The message is theatrical, designed to be repeated and embellished as it spreads. The legend of Robin Hood has become a weapon in itself, a symbol that inspires both hope among the oppressed and caution among their oppressors. You leave the guards bound, but not mistreated, positioned where they'll be found by the next travellers along the road. The wagons you keep, they'll be useful for transporting the goods through the forest before being dismantled for their valuable hardware and sound timber. The horses, too, are led away, a significant addition to your small herd that provides mobility and draft power for your growing community. The return journey to camp is jubilant despite the need for caution. This is your most significant seizure yet, not just in value, but in symbolic importance. The sheriff's personal luxuries redistributed to those whose labour and taxes paid for them in the first place. The tale will grow with each telling, further cementing Robin Hood's status as a champion of justice. Yet, as you lead your successful raiding party through the spring forest, Tuck's words from the previous day echo in your mind. Each success does indeed embolden you. Each victory against the sheriff's men reinforces your belief in the righteousness of your cause. But does it also lead you to take greater risks, to push the boundaries of what your small band can realistically accomplish? The question has no easy answer, but it deserves consideration. The people who have joined you in the Greenwood depend on your leadership, your judgment, your ability to balance audacity with prudence. The legend of Robin Hood may serve a greater purpose, as Tuck suggested, but the man behind the legend carries very real responsibilities. These thoughts occupy you as you reach the hidden camp, where eager faces greet your return with undisguised relief and excitement. News of your success spreads quickly, and the mood becomes celebratory as the captured goods are unloaded and examined. That evening, as the forest settles into twilight and the camp's fires cast dancing shadows among the trees, you find a moment of quiet reflection away from the ongoing festivities. The day's triumph has lifted everyone's spirits after the long, lean winter, providing not just material goods but renewed confidence in your shared purpose. A soft footfall alerts you to approaching company, and you turn to find Marion standing at the edge of the small clearing where you've sought solitude. For a moment, you think you're imagining her, a phantom conjured by your constant thoughts of home, but she remains solid and real. Her dark hair gleaming in the fading light, her eyes reflecting the same mixture of joy and uncertainty that floods your own heart. Marion, you breathe, her name a prayer on your lips. Robin, she replies, and the sound of her voice after so long breaks something loose inside you. In 3 strides you cross the distance between you, gathering her into an embrace that speaks more eloquently than words of the ache her absence has carved into your daily existence. She returns the embrace with equal fervour, her familiar scent, herbs and wood smoke and something indefinably her, enveloping you like a homecoming. For a long moment, neither of you speaks, content simply to confirm the solid reality of each other after months of separation. When you finally draw back to look at her properly, you notice the changes that time and hardship have wrought. She's thinner than you remember, with new lines at the corners of her eyes and a certain wariness in her expression that wasn't there before, but her spirit shines through, undiminished, the quiet strength that first drew you to her still evident in the set of her shoulders and the directness of her gaze. How, you ask, unable to form a more coherent question through the tumult of your emotions. Friar Tuck, she explains with a small smile. He came to Loxley yesterday, told me where to find the camp, said it was time. Tuck, of course. The friar's counsel about the power of legends suddenly takes on new meaning. He wasn't just speaking about inspiring resistance among the villagers, but about your own need for connection to what you left behind. And our son, you ask, the question painful in its necessity? Safe with friends in the village, she assures you. I couldn't risk bringing him, not yet. The sheriff's men still watch our cottage sometimes, though less often now that months have passed without sign of you. The news that your boy is well loosens a knot of anxiety you've carried so long it had become part of you. But Marion's presence raises new questions, new possibilities that both exhilarate and terrify. Are you begin, afraid to give voice to the hope rising within you? Are you staying? Marion's expression grows serious, her hand reaching up to touch your cheek in a gesture achingly familiar. I came to see for myself what you've built here, to understand what has kept you away when so many believe you could have returned in secret, at least for brief visits. There's no accusation in her tone, only a need to comprehend the choices you've made. You lead her to a fallen log where you can sit side by side, gathering your thoughts before attempting to explain. At first, it was simple survival, you begin, learning to live in the forest, to evade the sheriff's men, to find food and shelter. Each day was consumed by immediate needs, with little thought for the future beyond staying alive until the next dawn. Marion listens intently, her hand finding yours in the gathering darkness. But then others came, men like me who had fallen afoul of unjust laws, families who couldn't survive the sheriff's taxation. They looked to me for leadership, for protection, and I began to see that what we were doing here was more than just surviving. We were creating something new, something that stands against the corruption that has infected the law itself. Robin Hood, Marion says softly, the people's champion. They tell stories about you in every village, you know, how you appear like a ghost from the greenwood to right wrongs, to return what was unjustly taken. The stories grow taller with each telling, you admit with a small smile. I'm just a man doing what seems right. A man I've missed every day, Marion replies, her voice catching slightly. A man our son asks about whenever we're alone, wondering if the Robin Hood from the stories is his father. The thought of your boy connecting the outlaw legend with his absent father creates a complex tangle of emotions. Pride, sorrow, fear for how such knowledge might endanger him if spoken in the wrong company. What do you tell him, you ask? That his father is a good man who had to leave to protect us, but who thinks of us every day, Marion answers, and when he's older, he'll understand the full truth. The simplicity and faith of her response humbles you, despite everything, the separation, the hardship, the uncertainty. She has maintained her belief in you, in the rightness of your cause. And now, you ask, the question encompassing all the unspoken possibilities that hang between you. What happens now that you've seen this place, this life? Marion looks around at the forest that has become your home, her expression thoughtful in the deepening twilight. Now I understand better why you couldn't return, even briefly. The responsibility you carry, the community you've built, it's more than I imagined. She turns back to you, her decision evident in her eyes before she speaks. I want to be part of it, not just waiting in Locksley for your return, but here, helping to build something that matters. Our son too, when it's safe to bring him. The joy that floods through you at her words is almost painful in its intensity. To have Marion here, to rebuild some semblance of the family life you thought lost forever, it seems almost too much to hope for, yet practical concerns intrude even in this moment of reunion. The life here is hard, you warn, especially for a child. There's danger, not just from the sheriff's men, but from the forest itself. Harsh weather, wild animals, illness far from physicians. There's danger in Locksley too, Marion counters. The danger of slow starvation under crushing taxes, of watching good people broken by a system that no longer protects them. At least here there's purpose in the hardship, meaning in the struggle. Her determination is familiar, a reminder of why you fell in love with her in the first place. Marion has never been one to choose comfort over conviction, safety over what she believes is right. When can you return for good, you ask, already planning the adjustments needed to accommodate her and eventually your son in the forest community? After May Day, she replies, there are arrangements to make, preparations for leaving without drawing unwanted attention. Tuck will help, and there are others in the village who support what you're doing, who will assist in our quiet departure. The prospect of reuniting your family, even in the uncertain circumstances of outlaw life, fills you with renewed purpose. The weeks until May Day will pass in preparations of your own, creating more secure and comfortable living arrangements, ensuring food supplies are sufficient, planning how to safely integrate newcomers into the forest community's routines. As darkness falls completely around you, the sounds of celebration from the main camp still audible through the trees, you and Marion sit in companionable silence, hands intertwined, contemplating the future you'll build together in the heart of Sherwood. The legend of Robin Hood is still in its early stages, though you don't yet recognize how far it will spread or how long it will endure. In centuries to come, your name will echo through ballads and stories, plays and poems, each generation finding in your tale the particular kind of hero they need most. Some will emphasize the skilled archer, the man who could split an arrow at 100 paces. Others will focus on the romantic outlaw, driven to the greenwood by love or injustice. Still others will celebrate the champion of the poor, the man who took from the rich to give to those in need. Few will remember the real man behind the legend, the ordinary yeoman forced into extraordinary circumstances, the reluctant leader whose sense of justice compelled him to stand against corruption, the husband and father who sacrificed security for principle. The cold nights and empty stomachs, the constant vigilance, the weight of responsibility for those who followed you into the forest, these practical hardships will fade from the tale, leaving only the adventure and the moral. But perhaps that's as it should be. The power of your story lies not in its historical accuracy, but in its enduring message that one person, standing firmly for what is right despite personal cost, can inspire others to find their own courage. That oppression, no matter how powerful its enforcers, eventually meets resistance, that the human spirit yearns for justice and freedom, even when laws and authorities fail to provide them. As you and Marion finally rise to return to the camp where Friar Tuck waits with a knowing smile and your companions prepare to welcome her into their forest family, you feel a sense of completion that has eluded you since first fleeing into Sherwood. The path ahead remains uncertain, fraught with dangers both known and unforeseen. The sheriff's determination to capture you will only increase with each successful defiance of his authority. But you no longer face these challenges alone, with Marion beside you, with your son soon to join you, with the growing band of forest dwellers who have become a community bound by shared purpose. You have found something worth fighting for beyond mere survival. Robin Hood walks back into the circle of firelight, Marion's hand in his, ready to write the next chapter of a legend that will outlive the man, echo through centuries, and inspire generations yet unborn to stand against injustice wherever it appears. The ancient oaks of Sherwood Forest bear silent witness to this moment, their massive trunks and spreading branches unchanged by the brief span of human lives that find shelter beneath them. They have stood through countless winters and welcomed untold springs. Their quiet permanence a reminder that all things, tyranny and resistance, hardship and joy, legends and the truth behind them, eventually pass into the great cycle of renewal that governs the natural world. As you settle by the fire, surrounded by friends who have become family, the weight of the wooden pendant Marion gave you months ago rests against your heart like a promise fulfilled. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities to live the values that have come to define Robin Hood. But tonight, in this moment of connection and community, you find a peace that has eluded you since first setting foot in the greenwood as a hunted man. The legend is born, though its greatest chapters remain unwritten. The forest watches, ancient and patient, as another spring unfolds in Sherwood, bringing new life, new beginnings, and the continuing story of the outlaw who became a hero for all time.